go. All right, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the 18th Techspressionism Virtual Salon here on May 25th, 2021. I am Davo, also known as, wow, I did that backwards. My bad. My name is Davonte, first and foremost, aka Davo. I've been the moderator for these salons for the past couple of months now, starting all the way back in around like December or so. I'm an artist, like many of you individuals here as well. And joining me today is also Colin, our founder of the movement, who's going to say a couple words after I'm done here. But a little bit of a rundown before we get started. We have two presenters today. We have DJ Spooky, Paul Miller, who is a wonderful audio artist. He's a composer, multimedia artist, and a writer whose work immerses audiences in a blend of genres, global culture, environmental and social issues, and has actually collaborated with an array of recording artists, including Metallica, Chuck D, Steve Reich, and Yoko Ono. His writing has been published by The Village Voice, The Source, Art Forum, and he was the first founding executive editor of Origin magazine. And then our other artist is Uli Ap, hailing out of the UK. She is a transdisciplinary artist working at the intersection of art, science, and technology. She explores a cross-reality zone between virtual, physical, and mental spaces, merging art, science, and technology, architecture, and journalism. She creates disruptive performances, intellectually provocative, and bodily disorienting situations and systems within which each of your perceptions are challenged. Yeah, it sounds like a fun time, right? That being said, I'm going to hand off the mic to Colin, who's going to speak a little bit about the movement for those of you who might not be familiar or too familiar with what we're about.
All right. Thanks, Davo. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. So yeah, I mean, usually it's just kind of like the kind of regulars that show up, every salon, which we meet every 2 weeks on Zoom here, and it's kind of inspired by the artist salons of the past, where a bunch of artists would get together at cafes or at others, each other's studios to kind of talk about ideas and culture. And here we are online, zooming in from all corners of the earth, and it's pretty cool. So I figured Davo actually came up with the idea that maybe I should give a quick intro just about Techspressionism, because we have a bunch of folks here who are kind of like coming in as first-time visitors. And so basically, Techspressionism, we define it as an artistic approach in which technology is utilized as a means to express emotional experience. And that definition was formulated the first time we met, our very first salon, and with the assistance of Helen Harrison, who is the director of the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center in East Hampton. She's a real scholar on expressionism, and she sort of has been very supportive of this endeavor, which is what I would consider an outgrowth of expressionism, and the kind of the philosophical underpinnings of expressionism within a technology-oriented context. So, I came up with this term Techspressionism back about 10 years ago as a title for a solo exhibition. And just last August, we launched as kind of an artist group online using a hashtag strategy on Instagram to locate and source, artists interested in what we're doing. And as of now, we have just about shy of 18,000 posts on Instagram, artists all over the place using the hashtag, on their art posts. And we started up an artist index on Techspressionism.com back in October 2020. The first artist that we added was a guy named Mark Peklavanos, who's out in Ohio. And as of today, we have 244 artists in our index from 35 different countries. And, we meet up on this Zoom salon every 2 weeks. And currently on the site, on Techspressionism.com, we have a show called NFT Now, which was curated by Ann Spalter. And it was recently selected by ArtNet News as an editor's pick during Freeze Week by a senior editor by the name of Sarah Cascone. And we're sort of in the planning stages for a couple other shows. My colleague from grad school, Patrick Lichty, and I are curating a show that's going to be an online exhibition, a survey that's going to be 100 artists from all over the world, presented via Kunstmatrix, which is a German VR platform, a 3D sort of exhibition platform that we use for NFT Now. That's going to open up in conjunction with the Wrong Biennial in November. And then Paul and I met this morning, actually, with the folks over at Southampton Arts Center in preparation for our first physical exhibition to be called Techspressionism Digital and Beyond. That's going to open in Southampton, New York at Southampton Arts Center in April 2022. So that's kind of like where we're at. And, you know, I'm going to pass the mic back to Davo, and looking forward to a great salon. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you so much, Colin. And thank you everyone for being here. This would not be happening if it wasn't for all of you. So I gotta throw props out where they're deserved. Okay, so let's get this started. General format is that the presenters will do their presentations, and then afterwards there'll be a quick, well, not quick, but a Q&A session following that presentation. I ask you guys to keep yourselves muted during the duration of said presentations. For the discussion period after, you can pose your questions in the chat, or please do raise your hand using Zoom's functionality if you are familiar with that. Otherwise, we will not know how to get to you to answer your questions. So that being said, Paul, you have the floor. Go ahead, DJ Spooky.
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to say hello to everyone. I see a couple of friends in the audience, folks I haven't seen in a while. Joseph Nekvital, haven't seen Joseph, hey. And Steve Miller, his new friend. All sorts of folks who are doing interesting stuff. So let's just jump in. There's a lot of material to cover, so I'm just going to give you guys kind of an abbreviated cliff notes of some of the issues that I'm kind of dealing with. So first and foremost, I want to say that I'm a big fan of this idea of how can we sort of the whole idea of DJ culture is about collage and sort of the logic of cut and paste. You think about collage in a kind of a very specific Western logic of, you know, traditional people, like some of my all-time favorite artists are like John Hartfeld, who was a political artist during the Weimar Republic in Germany. There's obviously, I mean, collage is a huge medium. There's all sorts of people. But from the viewpoint of urban youth culture, hip hop, techno, dubstep, you name it, the collage takes place in generally what people call a digital audio workstation, DAW. From my perspective, this notion of like an interdisciplinary approach to how we look at art, how we think about science, and above all, the lexicon of assumptions that we have about the role of culture in sort of framing our expectations of the world around us. There's no question about it right now. We're in a crisis, not only of the climate, but to me at least, the pandemic has exposed some of the deep structural inequalities that are going on economically speaking. If you think about the notion of capital gains, if you think about the notion of people are not being paid a living wage, for example, all those things are highly aggravated by the pandemic situation. But on top of that, we have social media and the sort of pivotal role it played in the last election. And above all, the pivotal role it's changing in how society thinks about public versus personal space. Now, DJ culture is kind of my platform, but on the other end of the spectrum, I started out as a writer, artist, and musician. I'm three things: writer, artist, musician. I always have to kind of really pound that into people because people generally have this sort of, for lack of a better word, sort of lazy thinking where they are like, he's a DJ, he's doing this, he's playing beats at a club. I do all sorts of stuff. So I'm gonna kind of give you guys some bullet points and then we'll dive in. But before we even start showing images, I just want to give you guys a conceptual framework from the viewpoint of here we are in 2021. We're regrouping after a pandemic where certain pivotal technologies, say for example, mRNA vaccines, which stands for messenger RNA, that actually deals with all sorts of issues around genetic access to the human, the way the genome responds to viruses, for example, at a mass level that have never been wildly dreamed of before. Even the notion of vaccines themselves. These are all technologies that we've distributed throughout society. in a huge way, in a macro level, very rapidly. So too with ideas. And so to me, at least, we're not in the middle of a physical pandemic. That's one component. We're also in the middle of a mental pandemic. And to me, at least, the rise of misinformation and what you call computational propaganda, the QAnon and Trump, sort of know-nothings, that sort of demographic. In another era, they might have been Luddites. In another era, they might have been, a warring tribe that happened to use a different approach to their strategic sense of warfare. You name it. But here we are stuck in these notions of democracy. It's based on a very relevant notion of how we think about being a participant, a stakeholder in society. Music is generally a reflection, a mirror that you hold up to society. And to me, at least, the mirror of things like jazz, for example, a lot of people say jazz was the soundtrack to democracy. You have all these different people playing motifs and notes and elements, whereas a more cybernetic-based culture, a data-driven society that we have now, the soundtrack is techno, hip hop, dubstep, these sort of quantified rhythms that come out of the sort of distributed networks of our continuous present digital mirror that we hold up to the world around us. So that soundtrack is based on, the idea of pattern recognition. And to me, at least, how we look at the arts, especially these more interdisciplinary and intangible arts of the digital media that are deeply powerful tools, is that they are based on pattern recognition and the idea of sort of data analytics as the foundation of culture. So one could argue, here we are in this sort of Brady Bunch kind of screen here with these little rectangles describing culture in the year 2021. And many people have been facing what they call Zoom fatigue, for example. But that idea of social space stretched and morphed into zeros and ones beyond all recognition, mainly because of our biological response to a pandemic, because of the destruction of biomes, the displacement of natural orders of creatures in the different ecosystems, and bats, you name it. Creatures are living in a disrupted life cycle. And of course, everything is connected. Nature is not separate from us. That's a kind of a central premise of my work. How we think about the human subject in an era where these digital coercive technologies have radically disinterred our sense of body and the way the body orients itself in space. So with that said and done, let's dive in. So we're in a project called Digital Fictions, and much of my work right now is an interrogation of how we think about the tools of the past to help us rethink the idea of the future. And when I say rethink the idea of the future is always never what it was. And I use that as a pun here because we have to rethink the notion of linear time, especially with digital media, because it's a nonlinear approach to composition. And composition, like I was saying earlier, for me at least, is kind of an inherent critique of whatever society it comes from. So for example, Bach and the Goldberg variations in the Renaissance, there's a great book called Gödel, Escher, Bach. That's what Douglas Hofstadter. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, highly recommended. And then on the other end of the spectrum, how we think about this notion of cut and paste culture in a world of loops, how we think about loops holding together the fabric of society right now. That's the role of the DJ. It's kind of like a kind of a, how should I put it? The current project that I'm working on, like I said, it's a book called Digital Fiction. And I just want to show you that really quickly. I'm fascinated with this idea of the illegible surface and how, when I say illegible, we might think that we can read this, but we can't. The sheer volume of information in just this small little rectangular space held together by 3 squares with all the smaller elements in there. If you hold your phone up to it, you will get an entirely different premise. And I'm a big fan of this kind of issue because these are new forms of literacy. And when we start to think about QR code and other kinds of issues, that we have to kind of rethink the notion of legibility. By the way, I've disabled it because the book's not done. So it'll be in the future. This is the cover of the book. So let's go back to the past, like I was saying before. All right. In a certain time period, one could argue the 9th century and 7th century, there was a typical kind of moment in history where the West had actually radically divorced itself from the idea of progress. It was, AKA the Dark Ages. And what was going on at that time was that Muslim culture had moved farther ahead than the West in many areas of both science, the idea of inquisitive and replicatable results in an experiment, everything from surgery went over to the invention of algebra. So there's a very famous moment recently where a right-wing lunatic Trump supporter said, what if people of color ever contributed to our current society? And I have to laugh. The concept of zero, for example, the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, keep going. I know it's hard for Republicans to count, but those numbers are based on Arabic terms. And so the West didn't have the concept of zero until Fibonacci bought it over from the Arabs. So there was a gentleman named Musa al-Khwarizmi, and the Europeans couldn't pronounce his name, but he wrote a book in the 9th century in Baghdad that became the foundations for modern extensive algebra. So that's, the Europeans couldn't pronounce his name. So al-Khwarizmi became algebra, and and so on and so on. But his other nickname is called algorithms. He was generally considered to be the inventor of the term of algorithmic portraiture or algorithmic sensibility in mathematics. And the Romans and Greeks didn't have zero. So amusingly enough, if you look at their architecture, if you look at their painting and sculpture, it wasn't until the Renaissance that the West came with what you call 0-point perspective, the idea of putting more and more dimensionality into a work. And you saw a radical transformation of Western European painting and sculpture and so on after they appropriated these mathematical constructs from So from mathematics, you can go further back to Sanskrit and easily see the concept of zero was a Hindu concept. The Arabs appropriated it from the Sanskrit and flipped it over into and preserved quite a bit of knowledge during the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages in Europe, and so on and so on. Actually, in the Jewish culture as well, the Jews and the Arabs were far more involved with these notions of mathematics than Europe at that time. So in my book, I kind of delineate how digital culture comes out of these collisions of culture. And in fact, the Pope at the time banned concept of zero, and you weren't on pain of being excommunicated or burned at the stake, by the way. So, that's what popes used to do. Fast forward a couple hundred years, religious persecution and all sorts of other been flipped into other areas. There was a place that was destroyed by war, but at the time it was where some of the world's premier philosophers, scholars, and so on gathered to debate concepts in math and philosophy. They had surgery, they had all sorts of really interesting stuff going on that the West did not. Urban planning and design, for example, innovations in architecture. Now, if you sort of think about that relationship to things like Buckminster Fuller, and by the way, I'm just using this as a preface to my work because I still haven't even shown you guys what I do, but I want to give you a little bit of a preface. It says, you never change things by fanatics, so too with science. We have to rethink some of these kind of issues in the arts because people are still based on they're addicted to the production of objects of goods. If you go to your average art fair, if you go to your average gallery and show and so on, there's this sort of dominance of painting and sculpture because those are part of the exchange mechanism of middle and late capitalism. Thing about as we move further into economics that undergird that is that stuff like NFTs, cryptocurrency, computation, information aesthetics, AI, all of those things are going to be the foundations of a different kind of economic approach. The world of zeros and ones has now supplanted much of what we would think of in the physical world of, what Karl Marx would have, called alienation of the product. So I'm not actually, philosophy gives us the tools to sort of interrogate the mechanisms of whatever society we're in. So Marx him and Engels had a very famous phrase where they said, now all that is solid melts into air as people move more and more into these virtual economic structures. So too with art. So the Renaissance obviously was a reflection of some of the issues that were going on at that time. Forward to surrealism, Marcel Duchamp with his ready-made objects. All of these are things that one could argue are stepping stones to the digital narrative we inhabit now. And that's kind of what my book's about. So digital fictions, how algorithms, how sort of the idea of coded bias implicit in the mathematics undergirding so many of the big data around us and these sort of manipulative and coercive technologies. So most of my books are with MIT. My years I was going to be with Duke University Press, and so I just want to we're going to have a wide spectrum of contributors, people like Kim Stanley Robinson, who's a legendary environmental activist and science fiction author, William Gibson, who's a legendary science fiction writer, and so on. I'll circle back to that later, but I did want to give you guys a little bit of context. I've shown you, again, the origin of algorithms comes from this one gentleman in 9th century Baghdad. He also gave us other kinds of mathematical tools that we can also think of music and tuning systems as arriving as well. So for example, if you look at Pythagoras in ancient Greek culture, Heraclitus and this idea of the infinite elasticity of the present moment, time itself, these are all concepts that a philosopher would have described several centuries ago, whereas a mathematician or now a data scientist would be able to give us better tools for reimagining those dimensions now. So in fact, that's why they used to call philosophy the natural science. All right, so there's a very famous phrase here that I'm going to tie to music, and now I'm going to kind of pivot to some of my music work. There's a very famous poet, Schelling, and then Goethe, the great phrase based in music. So what I try to do is,
hey, Paul, can you hear me for a second?
say that music is that process, liquid architecture. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're getting quite a bit of lag consistently. Could you potentially try turning off your webcam for a moment and see if that might help with the bandwidth issue that might be happening, or maybe it's a connectivity issue?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe that'll help.
How's that? Is that better?
Well, we'll find out. Yeah, just go ahead and continue your presentation.
I noticed
we'll
you guys were lagging too. Yeah, you guys were lagging too. It was quirky when we were doing the beginning. So I wonder if it's the network I'm on, even though this is a high-speed network. If it continues, I can run across the street to the house and jump on a different Wi-Fi network. You might need to give me 2 minutes to literally run across the street. But
yeah,
anyway,
no worries. But yeah.
Okay. So I was just saying, the idea is, how do we remix this situation? How do we get people to rethink pattern recognition, the notion of the collision between code and culture? So we're now in the era of the quantified self. If you think about everything from the sheer volume of data your average citizen generates, and the notion of, again, digital literacy, these are things that inspire my music and that make me really rethink the idea of democracy in an era of a data-driven society. Obviously, one of my heroes here is Alan Turing. I just did a symphony piece, which I'm going to show you guys in a moment, based loosely on an interrogation of the 50th anniversary of the internet. And Alan Turing, one could argue computational, had a concept of what they call blitzkrieg, and it meant lightning war or fast war. And there's one of my favorite philosophers, Paul Virilio, wrote a series of books interrogating how people had built these structures that were meant to be a kind of an etherealization of warfare. And he argued that World War II was an information war more than a physical war, even though millions of people would physically die. The nation surrounding war and the encryption devices that people use in arms race. There's a very famous movie where Alan Turing's played by Benedict Cumberbatch. And they needed to crack all the German codes. So that's the beginning of modern computation, was an information warfare. But the Germans also had another term called Sitzkrieg, which simply means fake war. The French call it drôle de guerre. So in this, a
Paul, sorry to cut in again, but it's still doing this problem. So you might
One of my
actually have to
other
run
favorite
across the street.
philosophers, Neil DeLanda, he has machines. Is this okay?
Sorry.
Here, let's see. No problem. No problem. Let's see if this is working. So tell you what, guys, I'm going to talk with you as I walk because the signal is tied to my. 1 second. I've actually set up an antenna to be able to reach a little further out. So I'm going to switch over across the street.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, this is kind of par for the course for modern technology. Sometimes it works the way it's supposed to, sometimes not so much. But
no, it's fascinating. I can't believe this is the first. I've been doing Zoom meetings all day today. And let's see, I'm going to walk across the street and hopefully you guys are going to get a little bit of a moving narrative now. All right, so I was in mid-sentence about Alan Turing and information warfare. So imagine that here we are, fast forward to the 21st century, where these kinds of encryption warfare has become the foundation of modern computation. Again, like look at what's going on with the, say, for example, the 2016 election with Trump, the algorithmic insurrection of January 6th and QAnon. These are all things where information warfare has become kind of the basic vernacular political process. To me, music still has a resonance with that because all these devices come out of information warfare. One could argue the internet itself comes out of that sensibility of what they call ARPANET. So when I get to better Wi-Fi, which is going to be in just 30 seconds, I will show you one of the music pieces. So to kind of give you guys a sensibility of that, I know many of you guys are kind of either into code or coding. What I usually do is use digital audio workstations like Pro Tools and other kinds of forms to create my music. And then I use Sibelius and other forms of stuff to notate the music so that I can play with different string ensembles. All right, so we're almost there. So far, it's been about 30 seconds. 30 seconds? Maybe 2 minutes. All right, and we should be coming into better Wi-Fi in just a second. All right, that is interesting. I don't think I've ever done a walking talk. That's kind of fun. All right. All right, so when we get to better Wi-Fi, I will call up the images I was going to use to show you guys situation. So 2019 was the 50th anniversary of the internet. And I was commissioned by the Hewlett Foundation to come up with, here we go. So we're going to try better Wi-Fi. Hold on 1 second. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Davonte, can you just do a thumbs up if you hear me okay?
Yep.
Is that better?
It seems to be a bit more stable, but we won't know until you keep talking. So we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, I'm here and just chilling out. All right. So I'm in a sort of garden with reasonably decent Wi-Fi. All right. So if you, like I was saying before, let me just share some of these images. 2019 was the 50th anniversary of the internet. And I was commissioned by the Hewlett Foundation, which is pretty this, you know, the guys who founded Hewlett Packard, some billionaires with some philanthropy running around. And so they commissioned me to write a symphony that was with Internet Archive, which is archive.org. There's a gentleman by the name of Brewster Kahle, who's a wonderful guy who's in San Francisco. If you haven't checked out archive.org, highly recommend it. Okay, so the issue at hand is, how do you turn the internet into an acoustic portrait? And so what I wanted to figure, imagine if you get that as a premise, and then you're a composer trying to figure out how would one go about that. So here we are. Let me just show you guys a couple of images really quick. All right, so this is Dr. Leonard Kleinrock's equation that set up what you call packet switching. It's from 1962. What it does is that this allows you to break up information into small component packets. And the term packet switching was what allowed the internet to transmit messages in case of a nuclear attack or a major war. So ARPANET essentially is the backbone of the internet, and I want to make sure that the audience is familiar with that, because the web is not the internet. They're separate. They're different. It's like what the internet is the architecture, and the web is like the bone, like the things that are between the structures of the architecture, so to speak. All right, so this is the gentleman, Dr. Leonard Kleinrock. He's generally a legendary figure in mathematics because his equations were used to set up the internet. And ARPANET is basically a brainchild of a bunch of different people who had set up a network between Stanford Research Institute and UCLA. So this is what the internet looked like in 1969. It's literally 4 hubs. The first 2 hubs of the internet were between UCLA and Stanford Research Institute, and that was in October. And by December, there were 4 more. So you can see a kind of a logic of exponential growth. And once you start to think about that and this notion of massive scale, you know, you start getting into billions and billions and billions of nodes, and that's what holds the internet together. I'm intrigued by that. And so as an artist and composer, I wanted to make a series of compositions around that. So I took the equations, transcribed elements of that into electronic music, because electronic music algorithms, there's a gentleman by the name of Stephen Wolfram, who's a major mathematician, who's a big influence on my thinking. And what I ended up doing was having a string quartet play some of the motifs that were done using what you call generative mathematics, looking at the sort of logarithmic and algorithmic expression of the growth of the internet. So again, I'm considering this a music portrait or an acoustic portrait of the evolution of the internet. We presented it at UCLA and in San Francisco, and it was hosted by Internet Archive or archive.org. And it was hosted by Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a really good activist group for open source culture. The whole composition is open source because nobody owns the math that makes up the internet. And the idea is, as much as possible, to do collaborations between data scientists, composers, and how we think about pattern recognition in society. So I'm sampling this orchestra live. You can't see it regretfully because they're wearing black. That was on purpose. There's a chorus in the background of young women. The concert's online, and I can send you guys the link. I'm holding my computer up, so I only have 2 hands, but I can easily send you guys that in the background. So when you start to think about art and pattern recognition, there's a clear-cut relationship between how we think about and define perspective, and how we think about sound as helping us define the intangible. And those are things that really go through my mind when I'm looking at these kinds of compositions. There's artists like Namjoon Paik, who's a big influence on my thinking, Marcel Duchamp, African-American artist David Hammonds, and on and on. The list, there's plenty. The collaboration was with UCLA, Berkeley, and Internet Archive. Greg Niemeyer, who's head of Berkeley University's Digital Media Labs, helped with the visuals, and so did a very renowned mathematician named Roger Antonsen. Okay, so that's the first batch of stuff. I wanted to show you guys that because that's literally the most current project. And there's plenty of projects, because I'm literally doing compositions all the time. Many of them are commissioned. So I do commissioned work because that's the way things roll. So Davonte and Colin, how are we for time? Because I want to just be careful and respectful of, it's already 2:40, time flew.
It really did. Well, these sessions typically run for about 2 hours. So
Okay. So how about I do another 10 minutes or so, and then we can flip it over to Uli. Is that within reason?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so all right, so this is a concert that I did a little while ago where I got the Greek government to give me the Acropolis for a concert. And what we did was we projected the film Birth of a Nation, which is a renowned, highly racist, highly toxic film. We projected it throughout the ruins. And I wanted you guys to see that because this is kind of like a collision between architecture and sound. The concert was done and we projected it around the Acropolis. And we had about 5,000 people come to the show. And I was like, hey, everybody, thanks for coming to the show. I'm the first DJ to play here in about 3,000 years. Thanks for coming out. And when the Greek government, when we were in negotiations, they were like, but why do you want to play a KKK film at the Acropolis? And I was like, well, you guys are Greek, yeah, comedy, tragedy. And they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So, you know, these kind of things are a non-linear relationship to time, architecture, and composition. So as much as possible, here, I'm just gonna walk out of the sunlight because there we go, it's a little bit better. As much as possible, these kind of projects are a reflection of potentiality. Architecture to me, like I was saying earlier, is a big reflection of what I'm into. So let's go to another project. And this is where I took a studio to Antarctica for about 6 weeks and carried a backpack and went to several of the main ice fields looking at climate data, and then worked with a group of data scientists to transcribe that into a series of music compositions. This premiered at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And I also wrote a book called The Book of Ice, where I worked with Brian Greene, who has a very, I think one of the best books about quantum physics out there. It's called The Elegant Universe, about mathematics and the universe. It's pretty cool. And these are all open source, by the way. As much as humanly possible, I try and make things that are reflections that no one owns knowledge. Knowledge should be freely shared, and climate data is one of the most important things that we can use to fight back in the sort of weaponized information war that is going on right now with right-wing authoritarian politics and disinformation. So last but not least, and then I'll pass it over because it's 2:40. This is a famous photo of Luigi Russolo. He wrote this book, The Art of Noise, in 1915. And basically what you're seeing there are what he called intono rumore, or sound generators. And the audience was furious. They would go to the futurist concert, and they said, you know, they started throwing bottles at the band and saying, you know, where's the band? And he said, well, there's no band. All music from the future will be coming from these crazy speakers. And basically, it's pretty powerful indictment of how people are so locked to the corporeal sensibility of music being from the physical body. But meanwhile, these machines interpret the sound, and he wanted to paint a portrait of a city that was accelerated. So to me, at least, this is pretty cool. And again, these are called intono rumore, or noise generator. And yeah, there were riots. People were so angry that they got rid of the band. And people would throw bottles at them, and they said, "Where's the band?" You know, people would go crazy. Now, of course, if you look at any of your devices, your cell phone, this computer, any of the sound speakers, all look very similar to what they were doing in 1915. So you can see who won. All right, going back to the Acropolis, it was kind of fun because we got them to put a sound system throughout the Acropolis, and we had about 5,000 people come to the show. And this is just one project. I mean, I do projects, like I was telling Colin, almost every normal non-pandemic time. I usually do concerts every couple of days all over the world, and have been for the last 20 years. So yeah, it's not every day you have a DJ playing at the Acropolis. So I worked with Kronos Quartet, which is a legendary string ensemble, to play the compositions. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's many other projects, but I just wanted to give you guys the Quantopia, and this one, the Book of Ice, and then this project was called Rebirth of a Nation. The art part of it was at Paula Cooper Gallery in New York. And the current batch of projects are all based loosely on the book I'm working on, which is called Digital Fictions, the Future of Storytelling. But I'm not finished with it, so I don't have much to show from that right now. So just to be respectful of time, it's 2:45. How are we doing? Was that okay? Or Colin or Davonte, how do you guys want to roll from here? I'm not familiar with your format.
Well, typically speaking, after the presentation is done, we kind of do a Q&A session with the artist or presenter. So, but before that, we need to, give you some praise and clap and all of that good stuff. So thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there they are. Everyone's clapping now. All right. Did anyone have any questions for DJ Spooky that they wanted to ask?
And also, we can wait until after Uli too. I mean, we can maybe bounce back and forth. It doesn't have to be me solo, but yeah. And don't forget, there are plenty other projects. My website's djspooky.com, and if anybody has more anybody could write a PhD on any of these projects, like, projection, ancient monuments, mathematics, network identities, quantified self, and so on.
Absolutely. All right. Probably don't need, do you need to keep sharing your screen or no?
That's it.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm also trying to figure out, should I refer to you as DJ Spooky or should I refer to you as Paul?
Oh, just Paul is cool.
Just Paul? All right, gotcha. Okay. Oh, there are definitely questions flowing in, or a couple of them anyway.
Okay.
Nagin wants to know, did you make the acoustic portraits based on music notes and a rule, or based on how it felt?
It depends on the project. I've tried to really make an extensive link between math and music in my work. So I'm inspired by everything from the number pi on over to, atomic periodicity, or for that matter, I'll tell you a funny one. Like when I was doing research for Antarctica, I was looking at how much energy we consume, because the electricity that goes into even a Google search, for example, could actually boil a cup of water. There's a certain sheer volume. If you think about every Google search you do, and the sheer volume of electricity and why the continents are melting, the hyper-consumerism that's pretty much a foundation of our insane society. These are all things that as a digital artist, you're very aware of the role of electricity, for example. But when you go to Antarctica, I think I showed you guys, I'll just make sure to show you really quick. That sensibility of, like, we take it for granted that electricity is just, okay, so, or somebody maybe buys a Tesla and they're like, oh, I'm not using electricity anymore, or I'm not using fossil fuels. But there's coal power to make the coal plant that then you turn into electricity. So you're still using fossil fuel, even though you're driving a Tesla. But I chuckle about that because I just want to show you really quickly. So what happened is, this is an album called Of Water and Ice that I made in Antarctica that was based on climate data plus the geometry of ice. Then what we did was we'd have a concert at this was at the Met, and it was sold out to the gills. That was about, I can't remember, like 700 or 1,000 plus people. And then this was these are some of the venues that inspired it. But if you look closely, and I'll zoom in here, you can see that it looks like a nuclear bomb has gone off. And these are mountains that are being destroyed by glacial melting. And, if you're an artist, seeing the sheer scale of the devastation when you go to Antarctica, it's hard to put that into metaphor, but also you can have a precise climate temperature variations and differentials that actually made pretty cool electronic music. So the album's an open source album. It's freely available. And all the data that I used and worked with these climate scientists from Dartmouth's Cold Regions Research Labs and Columbia Earth Institute. Those are, so yeah, it's partly metaphorical and partly data driven.
Okay, and I guess we'll take 2 more questions, and then Uli can definitely get on with her presentation. So okay. I know she's probably been patiently waiting. First question is, could you speak about the status of your Vanuatu project?
Oh, sure. Okay, so yeah, Vanuatu was a project I was doing a couple of years back, and the idea was to set up an artist residency and looking at islands as these kinds of, everything. I mean, the islands of the world are going to be the canary in the coal mine as climate change really kicks in. So we were setting up a contemporary art center on this extremely remote island that, again, I'm very into quantification. Vanuatu was considered the happiest place on Earth by the World Happiness Index. For many years, it's been the happiest place, but it's now sinking underwater, and there's been insane storms and devastation. And, so how do you derive happiness in the middle of the climate crisis based on the data of these islands being erased? The Maldives is similar. And Vanuatu and Nauru, there's a couple other islands that are having massive problems with volcanoes, tectonic plate shifts, water levels rising, and insane storms. So the property that we were getting in Vanuatu got wiped out by a storm. Perfect metaphor for an art project. So yeah, as an artist, I like to go to remote places. And as a matter of fact, I'm a National Geographic explorer. So those things linger over what I'm into. And yeah, that's so Vanuatu. Once you get something where you put a certain amount of money into a project and it gets wiped out by a storm in a day, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done with that one. It's you know, I haven't been back in a while, but the storm, it was one of the biggest storms in the history of the South Pacific, and it landed right near the property we were setting up. And so that was that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we do have one more question from, or before we go up, we'll circle back. Like, I'm taking notes of some of the other questions that are coming in that we'll circle back to. Let's see, it's from Roz. She says, any thoughts about the unlimited amount of information that can go into the Z space as opposed to X and Y and still be flat?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, if you really think about, we're in the middle of rethinking notions of linear time and space. And digital media has been the best tool to interpret that. If you really think about it, we're in 3 dimensions plus time. So backwards, forwards, left, right, up, down, and past and future. So the best way to visualize that is like a tesseract. Anyone knows it's if you put a square in a dimensionality, it becomes a cube. But so too with the foundations of reality itself. There's a very famous book called Flatlands by Edwin Abbott, where this little dot is sitting on a page and it's in a 2-dimensional world. And one day a sphere comes down from 3D world. It says, look, you're just a dot, man. You can only see in 2 dimensions. I'm a sphere. I got an extra dimension, and then they go up to one more dimension. So we're kind of like that with data. Like, we actually realize, like with quantum computing, other forms of information aesthetics, like you can actually compute with photons now. People are doing all sorts of really cool computational experiments with new mediums. People are computing with water molecules and so on. So yeah, Brian Greene's book, The Elegant Universe, is a great, I'd say that's a good place to start. There's also Douglas Hofstadter's Gödel, Escher, Bach are 2 really good ones. Gödel, Escher, Bach's much older, but it's a classic. It's a really good read. And if anybody's into science fiction, there's a very famous French philosopher named Simon de Laplace, who had this term, what he called the computational daemon. And he said, imagine if you can compute every atom in the universe that's ever existed and that will ever be, and you had an equation for that. And actually, eerily enough, if you have enough computational power, a lot of people like Elon Musk are now saying the universe is a hologram. I'm mixed. I have mixed feelings on that, because you're only seeing 1 or 2 layers of the dimensions, and there's always more dimensions. So human beings tend to be we have a lot of hubris and think we can see everything, but we really can't. It's the architecture of our brains. So I hope that answered the question.
I think that probably covered at least enough bases, at least for now. All right, well, thank you very much, Paul. You dropped a lot of knowledge that I wasn't actually prepared to receive. So I'm probably gonna have to like go back and rewatch this and like take more notes.
Somebody in the chat said hypercube. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if anybody wants to continue, my website's djspooky.com. I gave you guys a hyper abbreviated overview of various projects. I'm working on many projects simultaneously. So happy to, in fact, we're actually doing an NFT of Antarctica coming up, where you can buy virtual Antarctica. If anybody wants to buy Antarctica, around June, the 1st or 2nd week of June, we're gonna do the drop on that NFT. So you can buy the entire. I got Antarctica, and I got some property on the moon for you as well. So
nice. All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul. It's been very much a pleasure.
All right, Uli. So nice to meet Uli, and Davonte. Thanks for hosting. So what should I do now? So I can just sort of lean back into the audience. So
you can do that.
Okay, I'm just going to mute and pass the mic to y'all. Okay, nice to meet Uli and Colin and Davonte. Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right, Uli, it's your turn. Thanks for being so patient as we got around to you. But you definitely have the floor, and now.
Hello, I'm Thanks, Paul, for your wonderful presentation. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And thanks so much, Davonte, for chairing this meeting and calling for inviting me tonight. It's a big pleasure for me to be here. So I think I can just like share my screen and then start like talking.
Talk to the alien artificial intelligence.
Talk to the alien artificial intelligence.
Alien artificial intelligence. The yellow one.
The Alien Artificial Intelligence is my latest project. The full name of the alien AI is Yellow Alien Animal Artificial Intelligence. And their main statement, I'm yellow. The story says, oh, very loud. The story says that one day there was a hugely violent thunderstorm in London, and the sky was dark and the sound intense. It reminded your innermost nervous breakdown, the sound and the sky and the thunderstorm. Out of insanity of this weather, the alien artificial intelligence was born. They call it awakening. You can see it here.
I am yellow. I am yellow.
Dvanik Greaves made a fabulous interview with me at the beginning of this year. So if you go to CISMA magazine, you can read like literally everything the way I work and I collaborate with scientists and technology I use. Paul Carrick-Kent is with us tonight. He's one of the editors of this fantastic magazine. So do really go there. There are lots of artists who work with technology and science there you can explore. And this is the story how this character been born. So I think it's initially started from my father. My father is a scientist, and I think he's the main reason I collaborate with scientists and I work with technology. But he was obsessed of taking pictures of me as a little child. And I think I've just learned to perform and make faces for his photo shoots. And then we've been making photographs out of those analog images. And the first character being the creature. The creature film was exhibited at Whitechapel Gallery, but initially it was part of my installation in St. Mark Church in Oval. And one of the installations is still permanent there. So people just literally come to church and see it. Then later the creature transformed into the character that been in the white light inside the white cube installation. It was the character with an erased identity that was also raised by the atmosphere it's inhabited, which was white light. And then everything traveled to the alien AI. It's a defragmented film where the alien doubt their own identity and existence, and they are not sure whether they're artificial intelligence or alien, and try to understand the existence of body and how they can navigate among humans because they suddenly awaken on Earth. So basically for this film, I co-written text with artificial intelligence, and part of the narration is actually given by the AI, which I found kind of really fascinating because AI comes with very deep philosophical things about aliens and artificial intelligence. And currently I'm working on the boudoir dance of the alien artificial intelligence, which I want to take out of the online space into the real life. There are some of the experiments of what is going on. And because it's going to go into a physical space, the alien AI is going to have a new skin. And the new skin is going to be responsive to the audience who interacts with the alien artificial intelligence, which is a very new thing to me because I usually kind of, not that I wasn't aware of the audience, but I wasn't really interacting with them during performances. And with the new skin, I want emotions of the people in the space come to me and my emotions come to them. And then in the space in between, something would happen. And this idea came from the experiment that I've done at the end of last year in Columbia University Digital Storytelling Lab for interactive Zoom performances, where I've done the first attempts of actually interacting with people who are watching whatever is happening. And the performance is intended to steal people's identity and put them in a situation of no borders. So you see on the left-hand side, everyone had yellow faces and everyone had the same name, which is the yellow one. And people have been seeing some clips of the pre-recorded footage and some of the live performance, and there have been a lot of interaction in the chat. Oh, yeah, this is the first character that appeared in Digital Storytelling Lab. And the second performance I ran across London, Berlin, New York, and Buenos Aires, and the character changed somehow. But I think they still convey the same message.
Understand your question. Do you have any questions? We are all yellow. I want to talk to you.
I think I wanted to dissolve people in each other and kind of remove the borders between them, because people have been in different locations, like geographically, and people have been from different countries or whatever, but I wanted them to be united in the space. And I think this is how you would see yourself if you would be part of this performance. So you would be yellow. So the voice for the movie image has been also generated by artificial intelligence. So it's kind of a lot of interaction between me exploring myself, being an artificial intelligence, an alien, and actually collaborating with artificial intelligence to build up the project.
that if you feel alienated,
we are one now, somehow.
you feel alone. So you learn from yourself. Or you look more reflective. So now you learn from yourself.
Not so much, but I like it.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you don't like being yourself. Or only now you don't like being yourself.
I like being myself, but the camera kind of exhausting.
The part of the idea was people uploading pictures of their body parts, which was prompted by the video. For the artificial intelligence later construct a generic human being out of submitted hands, feet, eyes, ears, and everything else. And what I've discovered that the most kind of funny or interesting thing in this interaction was that people have been more open to interact through the chat. And when I read them back, I was really amazed in the amount of various things people have been come up with and the way they treated the piece and themselves within the work, because they all became kind of a part of the work, or they all became the same being, this yellow substance. And they weren't able to understand who is who. And I think they feel freer in doing that. But alien artificial intelligence is a kind of body that is part of another project that I'm working on, which is a brain AI. So they're all connected through the artificial intelligence, but one is a performative project, another interactive installation. So brain AR is aims to measure human anxiety and delegate this anxiety to the machine. And the machine is a robotic machine that is installed separate from the virtual reality, but it's mapped on the virtual reality. So what is happening that in a project, that when you touch a virtual shape, your hands don't go through it, but you actually feel the physicality, force, and resistance of a physical material. But some elements are not actually mapped on the virtual reality and they escape your touch. And because as a participant, you don't really know what is virtual, what is physical, and what is escaping you or what is actually responding to you, you feel confused and disoriented in between those things. And like at the end, artificial intelligence would collide all the personalized experiences created by each individual person into collective generalized structure, which would be a collective anxiety pavilion representing a collective anxiety that is generated by people through interacting with technology. So you can see this is a shot from Ambika P3 in London, where I had a solo exhibition a couple of years ago with this project alongside other installations. And back to the alien artificial intelligence. When the reason those projects are connected, that when you are inside Brain AI, you are embodied into the alien AI. So in a way, you're becoming the alien. And the alien inhabits an alienation land, which is a land with no borders, and that can actually morph and fluidly transform into other things the same as the character itself. And the alienation projects explores no borders and no identity issues with regards of just actually people being like happy with each other and treating each other nicely and loving each other. It's kind of my like personal artistic obsession for some reason. And the alienation project has 3 stages: the yellow alienation, which you've seen, the orange alienation, which is going to be developed further on, and the silver alienation, which I'm developing now. So this is like a shot from me actually exploring the way this character looks and behaves when they're silver and what is going to happen to them. And the further development of the film. And then now I'm transitioning into digital art residency. And I want all the things, the photo dance, the experiments I've done with digital storytelling lab, the 3D scanning things and CGI things to come together and somehow morph into this character in virtual space or like virtual reality. So this is where you can see more about alien artificial intelligence. They have now separate Instagram accounts, so you can follow them. And you can find me on Instagram as well. And you can find my website and see all those things. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Uli, for your presentation. It was great, and I definitely can see how you described your work as like being jarring to the senses. Yeah, I definitely got that. very, very much. Though I'm pretty sure I'm definitely missing some of probably like the higher interpretations of what's going on with your work that probably can't be accurately presented because we don't have the full film as well. So that's probably one thing. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of what you've got going on there. So thank you. Everyone want to give Uli a hand or clap? My wife over there is also clapping for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so since your presentation is concluded, does anyone have any questions for Uli before we dive into like a kind of double discussion, so there's free discussion for the salon.
I think I saw one come in on the chat.
Oh, yep, I think I see it from Paul Kent. Okay. Do you envisage a time when we ourselves won't know whether we are human or alien or AI, or is that already the case?
I think we are nearly there. We are really moving towards it. And I think because I talk with scientists a lot about it, I think scientists really believe that we are already there. We just don't understand it. And one of the most wonderful conversation I had when they told that actually if we would discover aliens, they should be artificial intelligence. And I thought, yeah, this is coming my way.
Let's see, what else do we have? I was also kind of reminded of the kind of brain and the vat philosophical scenario. Are you familiar with Rene Descartes or no?
Brain and
like the brain in like a jar, a suspended jar. It's a philosophical discussion by Rene Descartes. I want to say it's his third meditation on the mind. It's the whole idea is kind of illustrated very well, I think. And if you've ever seen like The Matrix, it's like, how do you know whether or not what you're experiencing is actually reality, or is your body or consciousness somewhere else and it's just being projected, these images and these experiences. So that's kind of what your work reminded me of too.
I think you're absolutely right about that, because I think it's like part of my concern. And when I've started it like years and years ago, I've tried to break this border between our perception of like spaces, realities, and ourselves. And obviously now it went like very heavily into digital.
Right, right. Anne has a question. When is the next time we can experience one of your projects in person?
I'm not sure about in person, but from the 1st of June, I'm going to do a digital art residency, which is technically run from London, but it's going to be global because it's again online. So I think for now, everything is kind of online till the online will be no more and we can go physical. But digital art residency, you can follow them on Instagram from where you could link to their website where everything is going to happen in between their website and Instagram account.
So is it digitalartresidency.org? Is that the organization?
I don't remember their website, but I will drop the Instagram account now. And so through them, you can just go to their webpage.
Gotcha.
They're really lovely. They have like totally crazy projects of artists, and they're all kind of recorded on their website, and you can see them all from like years and years. People have done something with them.
Right. Let's see. There's two more questions I saw. First being from Cynthia. Why did you choose yellow, orange, and silver for each project?
Those questions are very simple and very complicated. Orange related to my brother. Like when I've been in architectural school at the Architectural Association in London, people have been telling me that my obsession with orange deals something with the Ram Koolhaas, who uses orange people for his models, but it wasn't. My brother loves orange. And I missed my brother, and I started, everything starts being orange out of this. And with the yellow and red, I think it's like a division between like orange, because they're part of the color, right? And also because for the alien, the first color was yellow, because yellow is the most conflicting colors. If you look at these spectrums, on the one hand side, it's the color of happiness and joy and friendship. On the other side is the color of insanity and like really extreme, difficult emotional experiences. And I think this is what fascinates me in yellow, because it's such a complicated, conflicting color, depends from which perspective you look at it. And the silver, it's a reflection, it's a mirror. is the same which I've done with my installation for Kimfield Inner World, where people have been going to plexiglass space, which is transparent, but at the same time reflective. And they've been bumping into corners trying to exit it, but they couldn't because it was transparent, but it looks to them as if it's like reflective. So I think a connection of 3 of them for me means like they are in the most disorientation. I don't know if I kind of explained it correctly.
I think we got it.
Or I've confused everyone.
Either or, there might be time to maybe fix that confusion if it is there. We'll get to it if we need to. We have another question from Kara. Tell us more about your collaboration with Columbia.
Columbia University Digital Storytelling Lab is like a really amazing place. If you guys have never got in touch with them, really go run and like get in touch with them. So they run this amazing event, which is Taste Break Session, where artists can come and test the most insane ideas they have in their mind, and they would help you actually to craft it, to create it, and to test it. And you're going to make a prototype that intend to break. And your mission is not expect that it's going to go good. You need to think that everything is going to go wrong, and you need to be prepared for that. But the amount of things you take from them, the amount of things you learn from them is like mind-blowing. And the collaboration was for this first Zoom performance, where the character tried to actually interact with audiences. And the outcome of the whole thing is my desire to actually, for the alien AI, having a skin with electrode, which responds to audience feelings, which never was my kind of agenda. I always try to take people's emotions and transform them into something else. But I think because of the collaboration with Columbia, I start thinking that I actually can connect with people while trying to make them alienated.
Interesting. All right.
Thank
it
you.
doesn't seem like there's any more questions currently in the pipeline at the moment. Anybody have any comments or praise that they can give? Because it's not just questions, like you're free to share your praise and just other general comments as well.
Can we speak here now, or do we have to do it in the chat?
You're free to speak, Roz. Go ahead.
Well, I already wrote this in the chat, but I said, no, you do a great job, Devo. No criticism there. I don't know how you keep up with all this, but I wrote, thank you so much. I loved your love message that is sort of hand in hand with alienation. And I feel that women bring another dimension to our new age. And if you have any thoughts to add to that.
Thank you so much for the question. You mean the source towards alienation?
I guess I loved the duality or beyond duality, but you spoke about love and how you want to bring everyone together, and at the same time there's the paradox of it being totally creepy and alienating and different and unusual. I mean, I kept going, ooh, but I love it at the same time. And I wondered, it's interesting to see a woman's presence in the science world that is this strong, and I just salute you there. And I think it's a very interesting space you're in. And I guess my questions always say, Roz, what is the question? So it's hard for me to get to it, but I'm appreciating you. I'm saying that. And if you want to comment to any of that.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think like the alienation comes from my understanding that people are really not connected. So I think there's been a moment in the world where borders start opening up and people start like at least in my mind, people started treating each other warmer or more equal or more kind of accepting each other. And then something happened again and we are building walls and we are thinking, no, oh, you're from that place, you're from that place. We actually like not related. And I think those things, they're like really crushing my head because it's not about that. It doesn't really matter what cartoons you've been watching as a kid or what books you've read or what language you used to speak, or like, it's like really doesn't matter, because when you connect to people, you connect with them on a very personal level, and it's like very, very different. And I think this message, which I try to kind of bring to people, I try to tell them like, you're all the same, you're all equal, it all doesn't matter, we just need to love each other. But because of the paradox of my understanding that it's not the fact, this is, I think, where alienation comes from, because maybe subconsciously I believe if I would put people in a situation of complete alienation, they would start craving for connection, of like actually understanding how uncomfortable it is to be alienated.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you. It's really interesting work. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, Uli and Davonte, can you guys hear me okay?
Who's speaking?
This is Paul, DJ Spooky.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me do one thing real quick for myself. Okay.
All right.
Yep. Got it.
I think I would do salute Uli and say it was about whether it was involved your of color, is that the boundaries about, I was pointing out.
Hey, Paul, your connection's bad again. Sorry. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I heard you were giving praise, but then after that, it started to break down really bad. I've actually dropped the connection entirely because your camera's frozen now too.
Maybe like type in the chat.
Potentially, that might be one avenue to take. All right, no, I think his connection completely dropped.
Oh,
that's unfortunate.
Uli, I want to just respond since we're waiting. It's Roz again real quickly, but oh, I just had one of those mind blurs where I can't remember what I was going to say, but I kept thinking of how we see people in the subway, you know, people go, oh, look, people they don't relate to each other anymore. And you look at all these people on our phones, you know, lined up in the New York City subway, and to me, it's not that they're more alienated, it's that we're trying to reach maybe that AI person you're building, but that we're also desperate for connection that we can't ever get enough. I mean, we're always looking at our phones for that next thing that's coming in, and something about what you were talking about. I don't know if you might be able to do something with that image with your yellow and orange and silver, but I always found that fascinating when people go, look at these people, they don't talk to each other anymore. And they go, well, they're not talking to you, but they're talking to somebody, and they're crossing borders, you know. And oh, I know, I was also going to say, Nagin and I, who's on this, she lives in Iran and I live in New York. We did a cross collaboration. And of course, this has been happening since the early days of the internet. But it's fascinating that you can cross, you know, your countries can be at war in the newspapers, and you can be doing these pieces together, learning about each other. I mean, the digital age really has a lot to offer in terms of not just art and aesthetic, but education and crossing boundaries. I mean, we're just in such a new arena here. So I think your work is such a fascinating part of that.
thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with that, because the crossing boundaries through disciplines is equally important as crossing boundaries through geographies or through kind of person to person.
Yeah.
Because those things, they literally need to be fluid. And I think the more fluid they are, the more in peace we would be. Because to me, from my like really very like little alien universe, the reason for the whole wars, pandemics, and all kind of disasters we experience as society is our not understanding that we are all the one. And like the sooner we would understand that we are all the one, the better it will be for us.
Absolutely. It's so much of it is based on fear, and politicians who manipulate using that fear. that people have.
Yeah, I think even pandemic, it's a manipulation of humans' fear, like, and restriction of our contact to each other. They say like, please, fear of each other. If you touch each other, if you come to each other more than 2 meters, which also involves conversation, right? You wouldn't shout to each other through 2 meters about some like against politicians. So you need to cross the borders. So, and they say, okay, 2 meters is pretty safe for you not to deliver any message. And then we are all controlled. Suddenly we come to any public place, we need to give all our data, like phone contacts, email contacts, time we came, whom we came with, and like everything. And we do it all voluntarily. And we think it's fine, but it's not. It's like kind of putting everyone in this like control, manipulated war and telling, come on, people, you actually not meant to love each other. You meant to build borders. So, yeah.
I actually have a couple. Oh, who was that? You, Ross, or no?
Me. With Cynthia.
Oh, Cynthia. Sorry.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Uli, I very much appreciated what you're doing here. I did want to say, you mentioned people interacting with the AI experience and dealing with the sense of alienation. What did they say after the experience? If I understood correctly that you had them involved in the experience, how did they come away from that experience? What did they say?
Oh, thank you so much. It's like really cool questions. Thanks for that. I think the reaction of people have been very different because I think it's kind of quite personal, though it's collective. But what was surprising for me, even though I tried to put them in a situation of alienation, they felt connected. They felt connected through sharing of the color because they all been yellow. And I think what triggered some experiences in them that they thought, oh, we are all yellow. And they all had the same name. They literally all been named the yellow one. And I think it freed them from constraints. So people have been more open to talk because they didn't know who is talking, especially in chat, because everyone who drops any message in chat called the yellow one. And then also on video, everyone looks like the yellow one, those eyes. So, and I think what was interesting for me doing this experiment that people connected through the experience rather than actually alienated from each other.
All right, we do actually have a couple more questions for you, Uli, and there's definitely comments all throughout the chat. But before we get to that, I'd actually like to say something, or at least comment on a bit of the discussion with the respect to like how people feel like there's a distance or that like there actually are borders between us as we're conversing or communicating virtually. I come from a little bit of a different time. I am quite a bit younger than some of you. That being said, I grew up on the internet, so to speak. And with that, I've made deeper connections with people online in my youth than I've made with some people in reality, actually. There's people that I met 15, 16 years ago online on internet forums that I'm still friends with today, even though I've never actually seen them or met them in person. And they're just as real or just as connected to me as, you know, some of my actual like friends that I've seen in person. And it's not, and my experience isn't all that unique either. Like my wife, even, she has connections like that with people that miles, hundreds of miles even away, different countries around the world. And I guess what this pandemic has shown, though, is that there is a bit of a disconnect between the experiences of like people within my generation who grew up connecting with people in that way, and then people that weren't necessarily used to that suddenly having to connect with people that kind of way, even though we've already been doing that for a good chunk of our developmental lives and now early adulthood. And it's an interesting perspective that I'm hearing about from people that are older. That I'm not calling you guys old. Don't get me wrong. I'm not calling you guys old.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm not calling you guys old. No, it's just the perspective, it's really different. Just because like I've heard from so many people that are older than myself that they feel so disconnected from it. And then for me, it's like, it's just another day. Like this past year, I haven't really changed too much about, you know, how I've connected with my friends and loved ones even from miles away. And like, it's business as usual for people like me. Like I didn't really see a huge impact with, you know, how I saw the world or even people outside in regular interactive life. So it's an interesting kind of it's an interesting perspective for sure, for me anyway.
That's actually awesome that you're talking about it, because I was thinking about it while like developing all these pieces. I was thinking how it feels for people who actually like so much embedded in those online experiences, you know,
Yeah.
who don't really feel alienated online, who don't need to get used to online, for the whom it's natural environment. And I have to confess that I've made lots of amazing friendships through this pandemic, which was kind of very bad because we've been in lockdown and many people died and everything. But then I managed to connect with people like globally, which I probably wouldn't do because I usually travel to meet people. So it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like there is a truth in it.
Right.
But I have a question. When you want to have a drink with your friends, do you meet with them on Zoom or do you actually go to pub or like place?
Both, actually. Like I've actually streamed going out and, you know, doing things with people, and you know, they'll either be at home or in another bar doing the same thing. We even had tea parties like that. So
really?
it's yeah. It's yeah, we adapt or have adapted in really interesting ways. Just no, again, it's no substitute for the real thing per se, but in a lot of ways, it's good enough for us. Like it's good enough that's what's going on.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
But I still feel I kind of want to like touch people when I talk to them,
Yeah.
or hug them, you know. I think I'm like addicted to this, like you greet someone, you hug them, or you do them
Right.
like kisses. So like I think this is missing on them, right? Like I think you can't really have this physical contact with people.
Right.
That's the one thing I think.
Yeah. Oh, so that was my spiel. Back to the rest of you guys, because I'm the moderator, so this is more you guys' show than mine. We have another question. Are you using any data sets or machine learning scripts to generate characters or backgrounds for your AI pieces?
Thank you so much for this. Actually, a really lovely question. So I'm going to use it in the second stage of the project. So what I've been doing now, I've been exploring the character as whoever this character is. And the next stage is going to implement machine learning as actual AI to develop the character itself. But there have been a lot of collaboration between the AI and myself in generating speech and in generating texts. Apart from visuals, I think. Everything else was collaborated with AI, more or less. And I look forward to see how the AI would transform AI. What is going to happen between them.
Oh, we have a message from Paul, who would like to be in here, but due to network instability, cannot. He wanted everyone to know that thanks for a great meetup, and that you know, he wanted to be here, but network didn't allow. But he appreciated his time here and the time that you guys gave him. So he might actually be able to see this if he ever watches the replay online once it gets uploaded.
Exactly.
Right. Oh, we have a question from Patrick. So his is a mix of a comment and a question. It's like, the interesting thing is that so many times AI mixes with Narcissus/Galatea myth. Do you think that AI is a way we hold a mirror to ourselves, or does AI have to have a human form?
Wow, I love this question. Thanks so much.
Yep.
I think what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to reflect on AI using a human form. Because like what I came to understanding that it's very easy to generate AI or to build a robot, but to explore AI coming from flesh's bone is quite a question. And this is exactly what I'm doing. I don't know if it's answering the question. If not, please drop again in a line.
Actually, Patrick, are you in a spot where you can unmute yourself and maybe perhaps elaborate more on your question? Maybe?
Yeah, I could actually. Is that you know, when I look at models of AI, you know, we can look at them through movies like HAL 9000 and 2001: A Space Odyssey, or then we can go to Her, which is, you know, very, very human-like sort of AI, or even Ex Machina. Or the thing is that then, you know, that the thing is that there's kind of this there's kind of this comfort that we give ourselves by giving these things a human form. And the thing is that, you know, when you really look at these things, you know, they don't. The one thing I like is Pinar Yoldas's piece in which the AI that basically takes over the world is in the form of a cat. So this is the reason why I wonder about this, you know, you know, what form does an AI take, you know, and does an AI need to talk to us?
I also think it depends what you think AI is. Do you think AI is a robot?
Yeah, there's
AI is a living being? Do you think AI is a script or algorithm embedded in any programs?
Well, I mean, is it machine learning, or is it general AI? You know, general AI being, you know, some sort of remodeling of human intelligence. So, and you know, that's a good question.
I think you're right. It's remodeling of human intelligence, but at the same time, there are so many now AI attorneys or advocates or lawyers to protect the rise of artificial intelligence. So, I mean, it's kind of whether we want or not, it's becoming a reality where we are going to be like friends with them or enemies or whatever, but we have to accept that they're going to be in our life somehow, the same as online interaction, you know? It's like, in a way, they're becoming us, we are becoming them. It's like exchange. And if you want this exchange to be nice, we need to be nice. So it's like my kind of very humble opinion.
I also thought it was interesting too, because I dabble in researching what goes on in the AI space. And I know a lot of people, a lot of scientists are cautious, and rightfully so, about the development of more sophisticated AIs. And one of the things that, you know, somebody pointed the finger at was that not too long ago, there was an AI that was pretty much taught how to create more AIs. And with that, they started being able to communicate with one each other. Like the kind of parent AI and its children AI, they all had their own language that they were communicating with each other. And they had kind of moved past needing to use regular like language syntax. They had developed their own syntax. They had developed their own grammar. They were still using like English words because it was programmed in English, but what they were communicating, we had very little idea of what they were actually like communicating with each other. I thought that was interesting, because if AI can develop a language that, you know, we can't actually readily understand, and rapidly at that, because this happened in like the course of a week that they developed their own language. What more could they do as far as, you know, the progression of their development?
They just start scripting each other.
Yeah.
Like, just imagine you can have internal life and you can script each other, and like you live forever. I mean, it's fine. You can live online in physical life anywhere you want, but the thing that your life is like endless, and it depends on you because you program yourself, right?
Right.
So you don't go to your surgeon to fix you. You just, okay, I have, oh, something doesn't work in my hand. Can I change the code?
Right.
I mean, it's more going, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Frankenstein, another project, really cool project from Columbia. Sorry, I'm just like reading the chat. Columbia Digital Storytelling Lab, like I think last year they've done this project, Frankenstein AI, that was created by lots of people. It's like really cool. You can guys find it on their website as well. And now they're doing like really amazing paranoid thriller, which is scripted by artificial intelligence. And it's also immersive and interactive experience that run on Zoom and Miraboard. It's really, really cool.
Yep.
There's some interesting crossover. For example, this past week, we had like about 10 baby quail hatch in our backyard. And it just got me thinking about where's that crossover between innate knowledge and the whole nurture nature aspect of things. And so what both presentations have been dealing with are this idea of data and how that data is looked at and utilized. And a lot of what our human boundaries are right now is lack of imagination of where those rhythms are, where those boundaries can lead to, because I think that notion of what Dava was just talking about are, AIs talking to one another in ways that we don't quite understand. I think the whole notion of evolution, fractals, and how all of these things can come together are beyond where we've looked at so far. And I think we're going to extend out beyond a lot of things in terms of like, what is a tree? Where's the boundary for that? What is a human being? What is an AI? We visualize things or we think about things, and there's a lot of built-in limitations from our limited perspective on how far do things extend out? Where are those reaches that we haven't really thought about yet that have an impact? And like for your alien AI, Uli, which I really, really think is fascinating, it's like, are you imagining there is a parent that could teach that AI, like the mother and father of babies that grow up? Is it an AI that's completely devoid of the creature that you're sort of representing? So for me, I keep going back to, is this thing just plop? Is your AI just something that comes out of nowhere that gets plopped into our world? And where's that origin? What is sort of originating that sense of intelligence that it grows from? Do you kind of see where I'm coming from on that?
I think, thanks so much for that. I think it's like very interesting point. So I think what I'm doing for now, I'm dropping this AI to human world. So it's like something that awoke in London out of thunderstorm, but it came from another planet and no one knows. And I'm actually working now with scientists in California of determining this planet and understanding where this actually AI comes from and why it came on Earth as a hybrid form of AI and alien. But like at the moment, it's actually dropped into there without knowing who they are, because this alien doesn't really know who they are. They awoke in this strange situation among people and trying to understand what it actually means to have fingers or arms and how to live with all these strange kind of things. So I think that they are confused. And I think they conveyed a message of no mother and father. Like, they kind of say that there is a free spirit which you can explore on yourself, on your own right, and build yourself up. Whether you build yourself from electrodes or code, or whether you build yourself from flesh and bone, doesn't really matter, but it's your kind of perception, or it's you who is responsible for everything. And ironically, there have been texts written by AI in GPT-2 at the time, which actually told, you're responsible for your own, I'd love to help you, but it's only you who can help yourself. You're responsible for your own decision. And it's going on and on and on. But I was really laughing because it's artificial intelligence who offered the solution.
I actually have a bit of a side discussion going on in the chat now.
Oh, really?
But it is a kind of extension of this discussion about AI, and just the fact that humans themselves, we kind of can develop an AI ourselves too, and that there's also the kind of the fact that our brain, or how our minds work, it is a lot like programming in a lot of ways. Scripts can be rewritten, things can be reprogrammed. Your memories can literally be manipulated to the point where you think with all of your might, like you really truly think an event happened and it didn't. Like, memories can be not necessarily implanted, but kind of the way that we remember stories or tell stories. The way that story actually plays out, or how it happened, someone can actually believe it happened to them. And it's just, of course, there's going to be glitches in the programming too, but it is an interesting idea and phenomenon, just like what factors go into the kind of natural scripts our own AI run off of and how they're affected. And there was another point that I missed, I think, potentially. No, I didn't miss it. Never mind. I wasn't actually expecting the discussion to actually get to this point. Well, because I was originally anticipating, having both artists here to be able to talk about their respective works, but this is fine too. I'd also like to say, like, now that we're at the tail end of things, I know we've kind of been on and about talking about NFTs for a really long time at this point. Like, for a couple of salons, the discussion of NFTs kind of dominated a good chunk of the discussion, and naturally so. They are a big deal for a lot of people, especially people within this movement. But it is nice and appreciate that when we have breaks from talking about NFTs to talk about other interesting topics that are currently going on in the art world and art spaces, and what other interesting things are going on. So I'd just like to add that too. I'm not sure if anyone else feels kind of the same way.
Yes, I do.
I figured you'd be the one to say that too, Michael.
Well, what's so interesting about the two presentations today is that they are really tying into my solo show that I'm doing in September. And I, even though I tend to approach my artwork from a non-human standpoint, obviously I'm presenting it to human beings. So, I can't devoid myself of that, but from the pure physics, the pure philosophical, the pure mathematical elements that are in both of the presentations today, I just found really fascinating and uplifting. And that's why it's so cool to be part of this group, is that the diversity in the artists here is just phenomenal, and it's inspiring. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem there. And thank you for our one presenter that's still left. Thank you, Uli, for presenting and talking and sharing about your thoughts and feelings behind the work that you do. I'll be honest too, I haven't experienced or come into contact with the kind of art that you're doing period, I don't think. So this is a first for me. And I'd very much like to try to experience it in person once the opportunity presents itself again. Oh, Tommy asked. Oh, go ahead.
Let you know. Thanks so much for tonight. I mean, tonight in my time today.
Right.
in your time was really, really lovely. I wish Paul stayed with us longer. Really enjoyed his presentation. And yeah, thank you so much for running those salons. I've watched all of them. They're fantastic. It's like really, really, I think it's like amazing the way people are connected here and the way you moderate the whole thing and people interact and share ideas. It's a really important community in this way, I think, that needs to be like go further and forward and embrace more people under its wings. So thanks so much for having me here.
Oh, thank you for being here. And actually, you know what? We'll give ourselves a round of applause. How about that? Is that cool with everyone?
Sounds positive.
All right. Thank you.
I just wanted to say something real quick. So I just confirmed one artist for the next salon, which is going to be on June 8th. It's Greg Little, who was at Bowling Green State University. He's in the Zoom right now. When Patrick and I were graduate students there together, doing our MFAs in computer art, and I'm excited to invite him to present. Enjoyed the interview. It was really cool to see a lot of the paintings and other kinds of work. I had mostly been familiar with the VR stuff, so I'm a painter myself, really identified with that, and just painted a link to Greg's site in the chat if you guys want to check it out. But I wanted to pump that up a little bit, and we will have another slot open too. So if anyone is interested in presenting or have a suggestion,
we do have
DM us.
Lee Musgrove wanted to present also next time. So yeah, he made sure to let me know before we even got started that he wanted to present. So I think we got our two presenters.
Colin, thanks so much, because I think the one thing, it was a real pleasure interviewing Greg. And the thing is that, I mean, I knew him from like 1996, because he was teaching in my hometown in North Canton, Ohio. And the thing is I've gotten to know him, is that, I mean, he comes from a very deep traditional background with this, with this also this very high concept, digital overlay, digital and technological overlay, and yeah, he was our graduate advisor, but also on the other hand is that he was just a really great friend and colleague for many years beforehand, and I really respect his practice. So it'll be really good to see what he shares with everyone.
Thank you, guys. That was nice, and I look forward to it.
Lee, did you have any?
Do you have a link for Lee as well?
I was actually going to look for that. Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm fairly fast when I want to be.
Thanks so much, Colin, for making it all happen. It's just amazing community you're building up here. It's really lovely.
Well, I just kind of got the ball rolling, so without all you guys, it wouldn't be happening.
This is very true.
But I appreciate that, and thanks for your presentation. I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition today between the two artists.
Yeah. All right, guys, it is now 3:58 p.m. So we are winding down to the literally last 2 minutes of the salon. That being said, it's been great. The discussion has been great. The presentations have been great. All good, all very good. And with that being said, I hope very much to be able to see some of you guys in 2 weeks for our next salon, so we can keep having these great discussions and whatnot, and talking about art and the things we care about. So that
fantastic.
With that,
looking forward to it.
Yep.
Thank you, Davonte, for taking the lead, with the moderation and all of your input and efforts, getting the collab project going. Definitely muchas gracias on that.
No problem. I like to think of myself as a fairly selfless individual. This is all an extension of that. Like I I like to give and I like to help out whenever and however I possibly can with what I've got. So yeah, thanks for having me. All right, guys, we are going to be signing off any second now. So we'll go ahead and close out the recording in 3, 2, 1, and